Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Federation's Most Wanted, the podcast where I, the Preacher 711, seek, locate, and interview fans from across the Blake 7 community. And I'm thrilled today to be on the mic with Jill Williams. Hi, Jill.
Hello.
How are you doing? Yeah, good. Good. Great to have you on here. I know you and I have been talking about this for a while. Diaries just kind of haven't made it, but here we are.
I'm really excited.
And I'm really grateful because when we put out the like Twitter call for a laugh and see you would come on here, I'd already had some people in the background that I kind of already agreed stuff with. But you were my first. You were the first person to answer the call that was put out. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that you wanted to come on.
Oh, I love this. I absolutely love this. Talking about Blake 7. I don't really have the opportunity otherwise. So excellent.
It's catharsis for us all. We can all just mutually nerd it out together. So I'm going to kick off, Jill, with our first question that I ask everybody. How and when did Blake 7 come into your life?
Oh, well, I was there right at the very beginning. I was 15 in 1978. So now you know how old I am. And I saw the first episode and I was intrigued because it was quite different to all the other stuff that I'd seen. I mean, I'd been kind of almost brought up on science fiction, like Doctor Who from the Cradle and Star Trek, the original series. Then there were things like Quatermass and the Pit, and I loved all these things. I should explain, I'm an only child, older parents, so kind of left to my own devices quite a lot. And then so I watched the first episode, and then 9th of January 1978, I can still remember the date, we had Spacefall. Wow. And right near the beginning of the programme, there was the scene with Raker telling the prisoners their fortune, and it was a really still scene. He was the only one moving, and he was talking really quietly and going, you have no rights, we can push you out of an airlock, blah, blah, blah. And then he says to one of the guards, he says, right, open it up. And the guy leans over and puts his hand on the blue plate. The door opens and he says, this is the extent of your world. And I'm like, oof. And over on the left-hand side of the screen, my left, there was this guy who, he looked mighty pissed off, right? And he swung his head round to look at the door. And there was a little voice in the back of my head, and it went, Chekhov's gun. The whole thing about there's something insignificant that becomes very important. And that, of course, was Kerr Avon.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then he prowled and growled his way throughout the episode, and I was utterly and irrevocably smitten, I think. My 15-year-old hormones were paying attention. I mean, he was a good-looking man, but it was the character of Avon that really, really grabbed me, because he was dark on several levels. He was clever, and that was, you didn't really see a lot of really clever people, I think, at that time. He was very contained. I think the word complicated comes to mind. And obviously, with all of that, I kind of intuited that he was quite damaged somehow. And that's very intriguing as well. And so that's why you don't always know how he's going to react. But, I believed in him the whole way through. So when you get to Star One and Blake says, Avon, for what it's worth, I've always trusted you. And I'm like, yes. So there you go. That's how I came to it.
But we'll I think we'll loiter a little bit in Avon Appreciation Land, because it was a hell of an introduction to him. He was great in those opening scenes when Blake's first kind of trying to enlist him. I really do like his performance in that. And most of all, I probably like after the botched attempt to mutiny, when you've got Jenna Blake and Avon all in one shot in the chairs with the three of them. I just love, Avon snarking then sets him up for the next two seasons, really. Everything you need to know you could get from that dynamic. Jenna the loyalist hanging off Blake's
Yes.
every word. And then Blake almost being unrepentant as well for the failure.
Yeah.
Him kind of just being, well,
Yeah.
next time we'll get it right. Well, it might not be a next time,
No,
Blake, because you just lost our chance.
no.
But yeah, no, it's
You'll
brilliant.
just bumble around looking for people to surrender to and
I
then
love
follow.
that. I think that's again, it's so even at that stage, the dialogue is still like razor sharp.
Perfect.
Oh, okay then. Well, we'll move on to what series are you? What series do you link to, go to, love the most, cherish the most?
This is like asking me to choose between children. I mean, there's something to love.
You got to do it.
But you've got to do it. And so it's between Series B and Series C for me. And I'm going to plump for B.
Oh, okay.
The reason being that you have the established crew. They've kind of got their voices by then. But you've got things like, so you're starting to get some background episodes. So you've got Jenna with Shadow and the Terra Nostra. You've also got her with Bounty. Is it Bounty? Yes.
Yeah, Bounty, yeah.
The Amagons. You've got Blake and his uncle and his cousin. And you've got a couple with Avon as well. I mean, you don't see everything, but you've got Tynus.
Yep.
And you've also got, obviously, Countdown, one of my favorites. Duh.
Yeah, great episode.
So, yeah, and it's just, I mean, the other thing is that there's huge amounts of, so in the middle, you've got Blake spectacularly failing with Pressure Point, haven't you?
Yeah.
And like he's been told and told and told, and he's just going ahead and just marching through every objection and not listening. So yeah. What have I got down here? I've got Gambit, mad. Star One, fantastic. Loved all of that. I mean, just brilliant. And Redemption was great, and Shadow was great. And I think the only two episodes that perhaps weren't high up there, not really a surprise. Voice from the Past. I'm sorry, I struggled with that one. And also Keeper. I wasn't all that gone on the Keeper. So, but everything else, yeah, loved it. And there are all kinds of weird and wonderful things that were coming out of there. Brilliant scenes from Travis in Trial. I mean, loved that. Fantastic. Matt Irvin was doing all the effects at the time. You've got fantastic costumes by June Hudson. I mean, my God. She inspired me to learn to sew more recently rather than back then. But yeah, so there's all of that. And the other thing, considering B and C, I in the end opted not for C for two reasons. Number one will not surprise you, Ben Steed. Kairos, I'm sorry, just no. And the other reason, perhaps more controversial, bloody Tarrant. I'm sorry, Tarrant. I am not a fan of the character. Love the man, can't stand the character. He's an arse.
Yeah. But on that point, this is something I remember decades ago with one of my own children, sort of having this character discussion. We were kind of analysing it. And we both I was really pleased because he came to a point that I was at mentally with Blake Seven, which is one of the things that makes the three-dimensional characters and the great characters in it is when you have a character that you don't hate them because they're badly written or badly acted. You hate them because, like you say, they're an arse. And if you met that person, exactly, you would avoid them like the plague. So I've always liked that's Taron. He's such an arse because it's well written that he's an arse. And certainly in Series B, Blake as well. I'll put him in that pot.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Arse, So yeah, I hear you. But I did like someone, long ago, put some. I can't remember if it was a tweet or where it was written, but they were like, Taron may be an arse, but he's our arse, And I thought, that's
yeah, absolutely
probably true as well.
I spoke to Stephen Pacey at Forever Avon last year, and I apologised to him for all the bad words I've used about him over the years, 'cause not him.
He was on good form that day. I
Yes,
spent a
he
while
was.
chatting to him. He was
They all
great.
were.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. I was wearing a T-shirt that day that was one of my older Blake Seven video games. It was all like these pixelated 8-bit characters across the middle. And bless him, as I like introduced myself, he leant forward and went, "Where's the Tarrant?" No, I just thought that was brilliant. I was like, he's in the game. I swear, where he's in there. So I love that. So
Brilliant.
are you Team Blake or Team Avon, or is this the most predictable answer ever coming?
It's the most predictable answer ever, of course. I'm Team Avon, and I was Team Avon right from the very beginning. But yeah, I mean, Blake's kind of, yeah, he's charming and charismatic, but he's very manipulative. And he doesn't listen. And he's constantly overriding any objections that anybody puts forward. And I get the feeling that all Avon really wanted was to be consulted, to be part of the decision making. Because there's one, I can't remember the precise episode, but Blake says to him, "Do you agree?" And Avon goes, "Do I have a choice?" He says, "Yes." He said, "Oh, then I agree."
Yeah, good point.
You know,
good point. You're right.
And he enables Blake in some of his even madder schemes. I mean, go back to Pressure Point. They're standing at the edge of the forbidden zone, and he goes, "Well, actually, there might be a way."
Yeah.
And he comes up with the idea of shooting the grid.
Yeah. But he does at the beginning of the episode as well, doesn't he? When they're kind of in the lazy pit having a chit chat, and everybody else has given Blake grief. Avon's the only one that kind of goes, yes, exactly. With motive, but it's still
Yes. And everybody says that Avon is quite cold. He's very logical and he's very cold. You actually watch Paul Darrow's performance. You get to trial, for example, and he's having the discussion with Blake, and he says, "Well, I don't get them killed." And he's standing there with his arms folded, and Blake turns back to him and puts his 2 fingers on his shoulder. He says, "True." And you watch Paul Darrow's breathing. He is cold and calm and logical. He is absolutely furious.
Yeah.
Because he's breathing really hard,
Yeah. Oh, it's great.
It's an incredible piece of acting. Incredible piece of acting.
I'd also pick out, you're talking about the manipulations of Blake. One of my personal favourites is Shadow, and right at the beginning there, when he's talking to Gan, and Gan, bless him, raises his very sensible objections, and I love that episode. And Blake every time makes me angry in the way, talking about great performances, right? The way he says the emphasis on the word "think." He says, "Think, Gan, think." And he's playing like a manipulator on the fact that Gan thinks he's the dimmest member of the crew. Gan often jokes about that he's not very bright himself. And Blake plays that manipulation on him. He uses Gan's own self-doubt and self-image against him. And I think that's low. You really have sunk now, Blake. So, yeah, okay. So
stuff. Just one last thing. There's all stuff about, you don't care about people, and have you ever cared about anyone, blah, 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 blah. But if you actually see some of he's very gentle with people, with some people. So he's gentle with Callie when she's on the floor in Project Avalon. He's very gentle with Megat in Deliverance. He's the only one who says, I'm sorry about your mother, to Varen Kasabi.
Yeah, good point.
And also Callie in Sarcophagus. He goes to her cabin because he's noticed that she's not on the flight deck, and he gives her a pep talk. Regrets.
Of course, I like it. And of course, he's the only guy that could carry off that lobster suit, even remotely credibly.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, what's your favourite episode? What's the go-to? And you can give that to me in as many ways as you want. You can give it to me in the whole one's your favourite, but one's the one you like watching the most, or however you want to play it. Answer me that.
I was thinking about this, and I started to write them down, and I'm getting like nearly a whole series worth. So I've got. Interestingly, I said B or C, and then I'm looking, and I've got Aftermath, Power Play, Rings of Death, Terminal, Sarcophagus. Love them all. I do love them. Don't get me wrong. But I loved City at the Edge of the World because it gives you a psychological insight into Villa, who is not stupid. And unfortunately, he was in the very first episode, in the way back, when he's in the cell, he's in the holding cell, and he's taken Blake's watch. And when Blake catches him, he's very edgy, but he don't see that again, which is unfortunate, because I think actually he would be brilliant at the edgy bit. But yeah, I mean, the psychology of him in City at the Edge of the World is great. But ultimately, I'm going to come down to Pressure Point, because that is the switching point, I think, where Blake's failed, and he's failed spectacularly, and he needs everybody to pick him up. And the thing is, I mean, they carry on in that series, and they eventually get to Star One, and he hasn't learnt his bloody lesson.
No.
He's going to sacrifice everybody and anybody. And you think, that's completely where you lost me, Blake. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I'm going to pick that.
Going to go Pressure Point. Well, it's a great choice. Aren't they all great choices? But then on to the not so great choices then. I'd say your least favourite, because as I think nearly everybody that's been on this podcast has said, there's no such thing as a bad Blake 7 in totality.
No.
But there's least favourites. So where are we going with that?
Animals has got to be pretty dire, hasn't it? It's not my favourite, and it clearly wasn't written for Josette Simon, which was such a waste, really, because she's a phenomenal actress. And I think that's just really, really sad. And it was also a waste of an appearance of Servalan. Frankly, I could have done, if she only had a certain number of contractual episodes, I could have done with her in other things.
Yeah.
If you see what
Agreed. Liberator or Scorpio? I think this is going to be another one that I think you're only going to give me one answer for. But
obviously, the Liberator. I mean, it was beautiful. It was stunning, and all of the things that went with it. So you had the guns, which were like nothing we'd ever seen before. I mean, I've got to say, kudos to Roger Murray Leach for the Liberator.
Yeah,
the designer,
absolutely.
And it just, I don't know very much about engineering, but it looked to me like it was definitely a ship that was so powerful, and it was a big status thing. A bit like Concorde, I mean, Concorde was going for 28 years or whatever it was, and every single time it went over, people would stop and look up.
Yeah.
So that's another.
It's a beautiful, like you say, absolutely. It's a beautiful thing. It looks functional. It looks like, the way it's got the 3 weapons kind of stuck out from it, it looks like it's designed to sit there and pound planets or whatever. I can believe it to look at it. Yeah. And I did used to fly my Liberator toy backwards, I will admit that. But that's a point. But
Scorpio's got Slave. I'm sorry, Slave.
Oh no! Now you're breaking my heart.
I don't like Slave. I'm sorry.
Oh, bless him.
Just 2. But no.
Don't talk to me about his death. It's too soon. Give me another 40 years and I'll be able to get over it.
I know.
So Travis 1 or Travis 2? What are we saying?
Oh, this is where I'm going to kind of wiggle a bit, because I think that Stephen Greif was absolutely the perfect Travis for his introduction to the series. He was a military elite. He was clever. He was strategic. He had the complete belief of Servalan behind him. He could command all of the resources of the Federation. He goes in, he says, I want those 3 pursuit ships. You shall have them. Everything was like laid at his door. So he carried that angst against Blake because of what had happened. But if you look at it, I mean, he won. he won. He arrested Blake. Blake was mind wiped. He was put up for the trial. He was mind wiped again. His family were destroyed. He knew that. And even though Blake was still alive, he won. Blake was nothing. Yeah, and I utterly believe that. And then going through series A, you've got, the scientists got the Phobon plague thing, the grey plague thing, and it was very expensive. And yes, it was late history, but and there were external things as well that kind of prevented him from winning. But he kept taking those blows. So in Duel, for example, he had Blake. He absolutely had him up in a corner, and it was only the Deus Ex Machina thing by Finnefer and Giroc that actually let Blake get away.
Yeah,
Blake didn't actually win. It's just he lived, and the fact that Blake's constantly saying to him, "You're not worth killing. I'm not going to kill you because you're not worth killing." And I think that kind of sort of cut him off at the knees so many times. Yeah. And by the time we get to series B, you see in the first appearance in Weapon, and like you've got the lovely Brian Croucher, who was given such a hard job to follow, but he's no longer certain of himself. He's actually quite angry that Servalan's used him as the litmus test on the clones, and he's constantly he's a psychologically different person in series 2. So the different face actually makes some kind of sense. And you also have the same thing with Ben Glynn. So in the first episode, and then you have a different actor who is doing something completely different in Voice from the Past. I might not like it, but yeah, very different. If you see what I mean.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
I'd say both Travises. Thank you very much.
That's right. And because our evil Zoom clock's moaning at us, I've only got time for one last question that we're going to have to speak through because I need this one from you. Gouda Prime Shootout Massacre. Who survived, Jill? Tell me. Did anybody?
I'm a bit of an all or nothing girl. I think there's sense in it being nobody survived. However, if they were to survive, I'd like all of them, with potentially the exception of Tarrant.
Oh dear, poor Tarrant. But listen, we are literally at less than a minute on the magic clock, so I've got to really fastly wrap up. A huge thanks to you, Jill, for coming on and talking to me today. I'm really sad that we missed each other at Forever Avon. Hopefully we'll get another chance in the future. But thank you all out there, my friends, for listening, liking and subscribing. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.